Chapter 1251. The ghost general that Yuan Fu had lured over was an extremely special kind of demonic ghost. It didn't become illusory, but solid. Although it lacked the ability to invade people's hearts and create illusions, it still obtained great power. Most importantly, one of its abilities was to devour the cultivators in the outside world to make itself stronger. After cultivators died in the central province, they would become new demonic ghosts over time. After being devoured by the ghost general, they would merge with it and become even stronger. Previously, Yuan Fu and Sikong Tan had accidentally encountered this thing and were chased for 100 miles. They had only managed to escape with their lives after using their trump cards. Apart from martial immortal existences, no one else could deal with this ghost general. Therefore, Yuan Fu was confident that as long as he lured the ghost general over, Chu Xiu would undoubtedly die. Ha ha. Chu Xiu, you're dead. Yuan Fu laughed maniacally. As he laughed, he spat out blood. Although Chu Xiu didn't know the ghost general's background, he could tell what Yuan Fu was planning just by looking at him. A cold glint appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes as he said, "You want me to die? Then go down and wait for me." An invisible sharp edge enveloped Yuan Fu's entire body. In his current state, Yuan Fu definitely couldn't dodge Chu Xiu's misty slash. However, at this moment Su Jiang, who had yet to arrive in front of them, suddenly began to form a hand seal. A ray of moonlight appeared in midair and engulfed Yuan Fu's body. After the moonlight flashed again, Yuan Fu's figure had already appeared beside Su Jiang. When Sikong Tan saw this scene, he simply had the urge to curse. He was also lying here, but the other party had only saved Yuan Fu. Fortunately, Yuan Fu attracted more hatred, so Chu Xiu focused most of his attention on Yuan Fu. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble. So, Sikong Tan could only curse as he ran toward them. The power of laws. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. Although the technique used by the other party was not a divine ability, it had already achieved the effect of controlling the rules. And it was even the rules of space. At this time, Yuan Fu vomited blood and said, "Quickly use the Moon Guide God technique and brand the mark on Chu Xiu's body." Su Jiang didn't make a move. Instead he asked, "Brother Yuan, were you all injured by this Chu Xiu?" Yuan Fu's expression was gloomy as he nodded and said, "I underestimated this Chu Xiu. He's much stronger than I expected. This time I miscalculated. Fortunately you came early. Wait, let's not talk nonsense. That ghost general is about to catch up. What are you waiting for?" Su Jiang smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Yuan, you really harmed us this time. The Moon Guide God technique is indeed bizarre, but the problem is it possible for Chu Xiu to let me leave a mark on him so easily? Previously, you said that if you joined hands with Sikong Tan that fatty, even if you can't beat Chu Xiu, you can still exhaust most of the other party's strength. Then I'll execute the Moon Guide God technique." In the end, Chu Xiu didn't exhaust much strength at all. Instead, it was the two of you who were heavily injured. You're also aware of my strength. Although my Guyu lineage has many secret arts, power isn't their forte. In a head-on clash, I can't even beat you, Brother Yuan. How can I fight with Chu Xiu? Yuan Fu's expression suddenly changed. He had forgotten about this point. Then what do we do now? Chen Jiolong asked in a muffled voice. Run. With your strength, you can escape the ghost general's pursuit, Yuan Fu said gloomily. After scheming so much, even he himself suffered heavy injuries. What else could he do but run at this time? That's right, bring Sikong Tan with you. At a time like this, Yuan Fu finally remembered Sikong Tan. Seeing that, Sikong Tan's eyes brimmed with tears, and the curses he gave Yuan Fu in his heart lessened slightly. Seeing Chen Jiolong escape with Yuan Fu and the others, Chu Xiu unleashed his greatest speed, turned around and ran. Yuan Fu and the others wanted to divert the trouble to him by bringing such a big guy over to deal with him. However, Chu Xiu was not stupid enough to fight head-on against a terrifying existence comparable to a martial immortal. After all, he had been plundering for long enough. It was time for him to go to the central region of the central province to test his luck. However, just at that moment, the ghost general that had been chasing after Su Jiang and the others suddenly changed direction. With a cold glint in its crimson eyes, it looked at Chu Xiu. In the next moment, Chu Xiu felt a chill from the bottom of his heart to the top of his head. He felt as if he was being locked down by some terrifying existence. The ghost general let out a furious roar that shook the 9 hells. The crimson light in its eyes shone brightly, as if a crimson willow. The wisp had been ignited within them. The crescent blade in its hand abruptly slashed at Chu Xiu. In an instant, everywhere it passed turned into hell. Crap. Chu Xiu's face abruptly sank. Blood energy burst out from his body, and he dodged the attack with speed. He never expected the ghost general to suddenly charge at him. Earlier, he had a vague guess that Yuan Fu wanted to use the ghost general as an excuse. However, there must have been an accident later. After they rescued Yuan Fu, they also prepared to escape. And now, the ghost general suddenly attacked him. Seeing that, Yuan Fu and the others wore dumbfounded expressions. They had no idea what was going on. On the other side, Chu Xiu had already escaped as fast as he could. However, the ghost general was still hot on his heels. In fact, it was even faster than when it was chasing Su Jiang and the others. It was obvious that the ghost general had a deep grudge against Chu Xiu. Chen Jiulong looked at Su Jiang. Brother Su, your Guyu lineage's secret technique is already so powerful. You were able to silently place a mark on Chu Xiu's body from so far away? Su Jiang was also dumbfounded. How is that possible? I didn't even make a move. Besides, if I had this kind of strength, why would I come to this place to try my luck? I could have gone back to inherit the position of Venerable Guyu's lineage long ago. Yuan Fu was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly burst into laughter. However, this laughter caused him to vomit a few more mouthfuls of blood. Yuan Fu laughed as he vomited blood. I get it now. I get it now. That idiot Chu Xiu must have killed a high-grade demonic ghost that had already developed some self-awareness. Then he refined its soul crystal. High-grade demonic ghosts can naturally sense each other. Although the ghost general has undergone some changes, and is different from most demonic ghosts, this aspect is still the same. He has already set his eyes on Chu Xiu, the kind that won't stop until one of us is dead. Chu Xiu had not escaped too far away. He also heard Yuan Fu's words. At this moment, Chu Xiu also had the urge to curse Zhong Qiushui's mother. Previously, Zhong Qiushui only told him that soul crystals could be refined to strengthen spiritual power and primordial spirit. However, he didn't tell him that there was a difference between low-grade and high-grade demonic ghosts. Furthermore, they couldn't be refined in the middle state. In fact, Chu Xiu had somewhat wronged Zhong Qiushui. It wasn't that Zhong Qiushui deliberately didn't want to tell him, but he himself had really forgotten. When Zhong Qiushui first entered the middle state, although he had also reached the heaven and earth mysterious realm, his strength wasn't considered strong. Simply put, he was the same as the martial artist that Chu Xiu robbed. He was the kind that accompanied Chu Xiu. Therefore, the experience he imparted was also the experience that a martial artist of that level should have. For Chu Xiu, it was a little unsuitable. Zhong Qiushui also didn't expect Chu Xiu to be so fierce. He had just entered the middle state, and he had already killed a high-grade demonic ghost. He was also bold enough to refine it on the spot in such a place. Su Jiang breathed a sigh of relief. He said to Yuan Fu, Brother Yuan, no matter what, your goal has been achieved. Let's leave for now. This Chu Xiu has been targeted by that ghost general. He will definitely not rest until he is dead. Yuan Fu said coldly, Leave? I can't leave. I want to see Chu Xiu die, before I can leave. Su Jiang immediately jumped in fright. Brother Yuan, don't be so stubborn. No matter what, Chu Xiu will die. If you insist on staying here, what if something unforeseen happens? That's a demonic ghost, not a human. Who knows what will happen in the end? There were many people who ended up dying because of this kind of thing. Su Jiang was cautious by nature. This time, he agreed to Yuan Fu's request. First, the two of them were indeed friends. Second, he was attracted by the many tokens on Chu Xiu. In fact, he was already a little regretful. Chu Xiu's strength was beyond imagination. The ghost general's strength was also beyond imagination. Yuan Fu snorted coldly. Stubborn? I'm not such a stubborn person. Could it be that the two of you have forgotten about the token on Chu Xiu? The soul crystal on Chu Xiu will probably be lost. A special demonic ghost like the Ghost General will devour the soul crystal. However, the tokens on his body were made by the Three Pristines Temple using a special method. Even a magic weapon can't cut it and won't be devoured. When we leave, what if someone passes by here and picks up the token? Wouldn't all the effort we've expended to get this token be given to someone else? Su Jiang slapped his head. Only now did he remember that he still had the tokens. However, even so, they didn't dare to get too close to Chu Xiao and the Ghost General. They only dared to watch carefully from a distance. At this time, the Ghost General was chasing Chu Xiao relentlessly. His speed had reached an extreme. Chu Xiao had many martial arts, but he didn't have any secret skills related to speed. That was not a flaw. After all, Chu Xiao's fleshly body was very powerful. Relying on the power of his fleshly body, he was able to burst forth with astonishing speed. Furthermore, he possessed many secret techniques. It would not be easy for others to escape from him. But the problem was that when he was chasing others, he was now being chased by others. Other than using the blood demon transformation technique and escaping with the blood escape, Chu Xiao had no other choice. However, using the blood demon transformation art would be equivalent to putting his life on the line. Even if Chu Xiao could escape, he would need half a month to recuperate and restore his vitality. Setting aside the fact that he didn't have a safe place to recuperate for half a month, the Exalted Divine Palace contest would only last for a month. If he wasted half of that time, it would be too late. Chu Xiao abruptly turned around, fighting spirit burning in his eyes. So what if he was a high-ranked demonic ghost general? He'd already killed one before, so he didn't mind killing a second. Chapter 1252. The Ghost General was very powerful. At the very least, from what Chu Xiao could sense, it was even stronger than some martial immortals. However, it remained that the Ghost General was a demonic ghost, an evil ghost. With the Cross Lotus Seal, Chu Xiao was still able to put up a fight against such an evil ghost. Thus, the instant he turned around, Chu Xiao formed a Cross Lotus Seal with his hand. Powerful Buddhist light blossomed. As the Cross Lotus Seal bloomed, the holy Buddhist light purified the power of the netherworld before him. The image of a Buddha appeared behind Chu Xiao. Buddhist chants descended, making Chu Xiao appear incomparably holy. In the next moment, the Ghost General let out a miserable howl. Black fog surrounded its body, and its entire body was sent flying. The black fog dispersed, leaving only a suit of armor standing upright in its original position. Su Jiang and the others were stunned by that scene. What happened to the promised high-level demonic Ghost General? What happened to the promised power to defeat martial immortals? Earlier, it was so ferocious in its pursuit of them. Why was it unable to even block a single attack from Chu Xiao? This isn't right. At that moment, Xikong Tan was cursing in his heart. This Yuanfu is simply incapable of accomplishing anything, but good at spoiling things. He insisted on staying here to watch. And now he ended up causing trouble. However, Chu Xiao still had a serious expression on his face. Following Chu Xiao's increase in strength, the Cross Lotus Seal's power had become even stronger than before. However, the seal earlier only managed to disperse the black fog around the Ghost General. That said, Chu Xiao could still sense the Ghost General's aura. Sure enough, as the power of the Cross Lotus Seal dissipated, the surrounding netherworld Ghost General condensed back into a solid form and gathered within the Ghost General's armor. The Ghost General took a step forward, causing the entire earth to tremble. The crescent moon blade slashed down with incomparable might. A loud clang rang out. Chu Xiao's blade slashed down. However, it was sent flying by the overwhelming power. His opponent was in existence comparable to a martial immortal. At the very least, his strength was around that of a level 2 martial immortal. It was simply not something that the current Chu Xiao could take on. And this was not the end. Chu Xiao could feel that every time Gui Jiang attacked, the heaven-earth yuan qi around him became thinner, and was replaced by the cold ghost qi of the netherworld. Although those ghost generals were not martial immortals, they were existences capable of affecting the laws of heaven and earth. However, martial immortals were active, while ghost generals were passive. The Ghost General roared and slashed down again and again. Chu Xiao dodged and dodged, but was sent flying again and again. He took a deep breath and released his god domain, enveloping the ghost general in the middle. Although the power of the celestial domain could destroy the netherworld ghost chi around the ghost general, the speed at which the ghost general recovered was even faster. It was impossible to cause any effective damage to the ghost general. But right at this moment, the attributes in the god territory changed in an instant. The misty chaotic energy turned into an extremely dazzling Buddha light. Under the illumination of the Buddha light, the power around the ghost general instantly began to evaporate. However, it was clear that although the power of the ordinary Buddha light could restrain the ghost general's power, it could not completely injure him like the cross-shaped lotus seal. Therefore, the ghost general braved the pressure of being burned by the Buddha light and looked at Chu Xiao. In an instant, the scarlet light shone brightly. Like two sharp swords, it shot into Chu Xiao's mind, causing him to groan. At this moment, illusions appeared in Chu Xiao's mind. It was as if he had fallen into a boundless sea of blood. Hungry ghosts tore at him, and the Yin wind eroded his bones. The feeling was extremely real. Fortunately, Chu Xiao had refined the soul crystal of a high-level demonic ghost. His mental strength and the power of his primordial spirit had skyrocketed, so it only took him a few breaths to remove himself from the illusion. Of course, if Chu Xiao had not refined the soul crystal, he would not have been targeted by the ghost general. It could only be said that everything was fate. As soon as he regained consciousness, the ghost general's crescent blade was already slashing towards him. The blade carried great power, and wherever it passed, it turned into a path of the netherworld. The ghost general did not have many tricks up his sleeves. Most of the time, it just slashed down monotonously. However, the power of each slash was not something that Chu Xiao could take head-on. He was forced to retreat step by step. Suddenly gritting his teeth, Chu Xiao formed another seal. The cross-shaped lotus seal blasted out again. Under the purification of the Buddha light, the black mist in the ghost general's armor was once again shattered. However, this time, Chu Xiao did not retreat. Instead, he took the opportunity to take the initiative to advance. The blade in his hand shone brightly, and the 7 limits, misty slash, and the blade intent of the word break slashed down one after another, bombarding the ghost general's armor. After the black mist in the ghost general's armor was shattered, it could still gather again. Therefore, Chu Xiao suspected that there was a problem with the armor. He wanted to try and shatter it directly to see if the ghost general could gather again. After the breaking formation was integrated with Listen to Spring Rain, it could be said to be the best of the best magic weapons. In terms of pure sharpness, even Listen to Spring Rain at its peak was not as good as the breaking formation. The ghost general's armor was formed from the armor and weapons of the warriors who had died in the Central Plains over the years. Naturally, its material was not as good as the breaking formation. Therefore, under such a violent slash by Chu Xiao, before the ghost general could gather again, the armor had already shattered. However, a scene that Chu Xiao could not accept appeared. After the black mist returned to the ghost general's body, 2 rays of scarlet light bloomed. Tentacle-like objects extended out of the black mist, hooking onto the fragments of the battle armor, and pulling them back into the ghost general's body. Under the effect of the black mist, the battle armor fused together, and did not seem to be damaged at all. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiao's heart suddenly sank. He had guessed wrong. The ghost general's weak point was not the armor. The armor was the same as the black mist. As long as there were fragments, it could continue to recover. Seeing that the ghost general slashed again, Chu Xiao did not hesitate, and continued to smash the cross-shaped lotus seal. This time, Chu Xiao did not attack the armor. Instead, he took advantage of the critical moment when the black mist disappeared to form the Vairocana seal in his hand. He directly smashed it towards the scarlet eyes, and in an instant, a powerful Buddhist light enveloped it. A mournful howl came from within the black mist. Clearly, this attack had injured the demonic ghosts quite badly. However, even though the scarlet eyes were no longer there, the black mist began to condense again and appeared inside the armor. The only difference was that after the body reformed, the scarlet light in the ghost general's eyes dimmed a little, and it was not as strong as before. This scene made Chu Xiao's heart sink to the bottom. Attacking the scarlet eyes was useful. It was definitely a weak point of the ghost general. However, The problem was that he had already used his mystique to destroy the Ghost General's eyes once, but the Ghost General could still revive. It was just that its aura was slightly weaker than before, but not by much. On the other hand, Chu Xiu could not hold on much longer. The mystique of the cross-shaped lotus seal consumed much less energy than the ordinary mystiques he had, especially when facing evil ghosts like the Ghost General. It was actually very worthwhile. However, the problem was how many more times could Chu Xiu use the cross-shaped lotus seal. Even though the cross-shaped lotus seal consumed less energy than other mystiques like the lawful manifestations of heaven and earth, it was not so little that Chu Xiu could use it like an ordinary technique. If this were to continue, he would definitely be the first one to be exhausted to death. With the eyesight of Yu Wenfu and the others, they could clearly tell that Chu Xiu was currently in an extremely awkward situation. His Buddhist mystique was truly astonishing. It was capable of taking on a martial immortal level demonic ghost general head-on. However, the demonic ghost general was not that easy to deal with. Being able to take on the demonic ghost general did not mean that one could kill it. Looking at Chu Xiu's repeated failures, Yu Wenfu's eyes revealed a smug look. Even though all sorts of variables had appeared in his plan, the final result was still the same. At that moment, Chu Xiu was indeed in an incomparably wretched state. Using the cross-shaped lotus seal 3 times in a row had consumed as much energy as using the complete lawful manifestations of heaven and earth. Even though Chu Xiu still had the clear sky reflecting shadow as his trump card, he did not dare to use it. The reason for that was because Chu Xiu was not confident that he would be able to kill the demonic ghost general after using the clear sky reflecting shadow. This thing was simply too strange. Even though the demonic ghost general's attack method and form were completely different from the demonic ghosts that Chu Xiu had encountered before, their core was the same. Every single demonic ghost general had a fatal weakness. Before the weakness could be found, the demonic ghost general would be incomparably powerful. However, once the weakness was found, the demonic ghost general would be able to easily kill it. However, the problem was, which part of the demonic ghost general's weakness was it? It could not be killed, it could not be smashed, and its strength was equivalent to that of a martial immortal level expert. It simply did not have any weaknesses. In fact, even if a martial immortal level expert came, it would be easy to escape. However, to kill the monster would be incomparably difficult. At that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something that he had overlooked the entire time. Actually, the weakness of the demonic ghost general was very obvious. It should be said that its weakness had always been in front of him, in front of everyone. However, due to the demonic ghost general's enormous body and frightening strength, everyone had subconsciously overlooked it. Even though Chu Xiu did not dare to say that he was 100% certain, he was at least 90% certain that he could kill the demonic ghost general. When the demonic ghost general swung its crescent blade down again, Chu Xiu suddenly formed hand seals. Then, the primordial spirit behind him began to shine with dazzling golden light. In an instant, it shone in the sky and pierced into the black fog. An endless amount of blackness completely enveloped Chu Xiu's primordial spirit. It was the aura of death, the extremely gloomy ghostly energy of the netherworld. It was continuously corroding Chu Xiu's primordial spirit. However, Chu Xiu acted as if he did not notice it in the slightest. Controlling his primordial spirit, he continued to swim towards the deepest part of the ghostly energy of the netherworld. At the deepest part of the ghostly energy of the netherworld was a scene of purgatory. Looking at it, Chu Xiu could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Chapter 1253. In the deepest part of the netherworld ghostly aura, countless figures were crowded together. Some of their limbs were so twisted that they no longer resembled humans. These people gathered together, and were all infected by the ghostly aura of the netherworld. Their expressions were incomparably hideous as they let out miserable howls. Those people, or rather, those ghosts, were all Daoyuotian cultivators who had been devoured by the ghost general over the years. The ghost general was special in that after the other demonic ghosts killed people, their primordial spirits would not be devoured. Instead, they would gradually be assimilated by the distorted laws of the central province and become terrifying demonic ghosts. Furthermore, Those who had been devoured by the Ghost General were gathered here, and became part of the Ghost General. However, what Chu Xiu found was not them. Instead, at the very center of the group, there was a burly man wrapped in black qi. He was wearing the battle armor of the martial god sect, and his primordial spirit was still intact. But when he saw Chu Xiu, his expression turned hideous and he frantically tried to break free from the black qi around him. His mouth only shouted 3 words. Kill me! Kill me! Hurry up and kill me! The weak power of his primordial spirit approached Chu Xiu. It did not pose any threat, but when Chu Xiu saw the information contained in it, he could not help but shake his head. The burly man before him was not a demonic ghost, but he was the core of the demonic ghost. From the power of his primordial spirit, Chu Xiu saw the entire process of the Ghost General's birth. This burly man was a hall master of the martial god sect 3,000 years ago. After entering the central province, he was killed by a high-ranked demonic ghost. Actually, this was all fate. Every time the Daluotian world opened, it would be good if half of the cultivators who entered survived. A portion of them died at the hands of other cultivators, while the rest died at the hands of demonic ghosts. Under normal circumstances, this burly man should have been assimilated into a demonic ghost. However, he had an ancient treasure in his possession that could preserve his primordial spirit. The power of the central province wanted to assimilate his primordial spirit, but it was stopped by the treasure. But this was not a good thing. The power within the central province was the distortion of the laws created by the connection between the two worlds. It was a power that not even martial immortals could resist or control. Therefore, even though the twisting power did not completely turn the burly man into a demon ghost, it continued to gather power on the outside, wrapping his entire body in it. That power grew stronger and stronger, and in the end, it even developed its own consciousness and became a Ghost General. Then, as the Ghost General killed more and more people, the devouring power became stronger and stronger. The warriors of the War God sect had no hope of escaping. Although his soul was protected by a treasure, allowing him to preserve the last sliver of his true spirit, he would forever be surrounded by countless evil spirits and corroded by the ghostly aura of the netherworld. Therefore, this warrior of the warring martial god sect could only be said to be in a state where he could neither live nor die. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have let the demonic ghost kill him and have his nascent soul dissipate and assimilate with it. That way, he wouldn't have been tortured like this. After so many years, Chu Xiu was the first person to reach the deepest part of his primordial spirit. In the past, when other people faced the Ghost General, they saw its powerful power and the way it fought different from other demonic ghosts. They subconsciously treated it as a special existence. However, they neglected the fact that in a place like the Central Province, the power of the laws could distort all primordial spirits into demonic ghosts. Although the Ghost General's power was special, it was still a demonic ghost. Therefore, its weakness was naturally the same. If one could find its core and destroy it in one blow, they would be able to kill it completely. The Ghost General instinctively sensed the threat posed by Chu Xiu. In an instant, the ghostly aura of the netherworld surged and seeped into the densely packed primordial spirit. In an instant, countless ferocious-looking evil spirits roared and attacked Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu only formed a seal, cross-shaped lotus seal. Among the remarkable skills that Chu Xiu had, the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth were inherited from the statue and not comprehended by himself. The clear sky illuminating shadow was inherited from Dugu Weiwei, and not comprehended by himself. Only the cross-shaped lotus seal was successfully comprehended by activating the power of the Subhuti treasure tree. Although the Subhuti treasure tree was the key, it was only a catalyst. The one who truly manifested the remarkable skill was Chu Xiu himself. Therefore, of the 3 remarkable skills, the one that Chu Xiu could truly master was the cross-shaped lotus seal that belonged to the Buddhist sections. Although Chu Xiu was in the form of a primordial spirit, this remarkable skill had already been engraved into his true spirit. Even if he was in the form of a primordial spirit, he could still use it. In the next moment, a holy and dazzling Buddhist light shone brightly, purifying and dispersing everything. The cross-shaped lotus seal bloomed, the ghostly aura of the netherworld dissipated, and the true spirits dissipated. When the cross-shaped lotus seal bloomed to its peak, the remaining true spirit of the war god sect cultivator was purified by the power and began to dissipate. However, although his primordial spirit dissipated, there was no sign of pain in his eyes. There was only a look of relief. The war god sect cultivator bowed at Chuxiu, thanking him for freeing himself. At the same time, the moment he completely dissipated, a weak primordial spirit message was transmitted to Chuxiu. After checking the message, Chuxiu raised his brows and said, "You're very particular about the person." Although Chuxiu had only wanted to kill the ghost general, and had not specifically come to free him, the war god sect cultivator still gave Chuxiu a gift of gratitude in the end. He was originally the hall master of a hall in the war god sect. He was already a half-step martial immortal, and had a chance of making a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm after entering the central province. However, before he could make a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm, he discovered a treasure left behind by a predecessor, which attracted many experts to fight over. In the end, although he won, he was seriously injured. In the end, before he could find a place to recuperate, he unfortunately encountered a high-level demonic ghost and died there. The message he gave to Chuxiu was the place where he died, where his remains and the treasures he had obtained were located. However, there was a high-level demonic ghost there. As long as Chuxiu could kill it, he would be able to obtain the treasures. Looking at the ghostly aura of the netherworld that was collapsing and dissipating around him, Chuxiu's primordial spirit shone brightly and returned to his body. However, the moment his primordial spirit returned to his body, Chuxiu's face turned as pale as a dead man's. Although the cross-shaped lotus seal was a divine ability, it did not consume too much energy. If Chuxiu were to use it with his physical strength, he would definitely be able to endure it. However, he had only used the power of his primordial spirit to cast the cross-shaped lotus seal. Even with Chuxiu's current primordial spirit, he would not be able to endure the consumption. At that moment, Yuan Fu and the others were dumbfounded. They didn't know what happened inside the ghost general. They only saw a flash of golden light. It seemed to be a primordial spirit-type attack. Then the ghost general started dissipating. It wasn't a temporary dissipation like before. It was a true dissipation. The ghostly aura of the netherworld drifted in the air, then completely disappeared. The armor and weapons left behind by the ghost general also crumbled, turning into some ordinary armor and weapons. There was only a soul crystal left, a huge soul crystal the size of a human head. Yuan Fu and the others all widened their eyes, expressions of disbelief on their faces. They simply thought they were seeing an illusion. They had faced that ghost general before, so they knew how powerful it was. Precisely because of that, they were confident that Chuxiu would definitely die by its hands. However, who would have thought that the powerful ghost general, whose strength was comparable to the first or second level of martial immortal, would die by Chuxiu's hands? He died in such a strange way. On the side, Xikongtian cautiously said, "Brother Yuan, let's quickly leave. Otherwise, when Chuxiu recovers, we will be in trouble." As Yuan Fu vomited blood, he tightly clenched his fists. Suddenly he coldly said, "Leave? Leave for what? After spending so much effort, you and I are heavily injured, and even risked danger to lure the ghost general over. If we leave just like that, wouldn't that be a joke? Although I don't know what method Chuxiu used to kill the ghost general, just look at his current appearance. He's definitely not in a good state. After fighting a fierce battle with us, and then using all his power to kill the ghost general, Chuxiu is already an arrow at the end of its flight. Xikongtian, you still have battle power. Brother Chen and Brother Su are also unharmed. Three-peak profound understanding realm existences going to kill an exhausted Chuxiu. How could they not kill him? Xikongtian had already cursed Yuan Fu in his heart countless times. Right now he felt that Yuan Fu was a jinx. Every time he swore that he was certain of something, there would definitely be an accident. Just like before when he dragged him to stall Chuxiu, wanting to exhaust the other party. But in the end? You still have the nerve to say that it was a fierce battle? It was clearly a beating, and the other party didn't even break a sweat. After that, he asserted that the ghost general would definitely be able to kill Chuxiu, and they watched anxiously. In the end he was killed, But it was Chu Xiu who killed the ghost general. Now Yuan Fu was actually dragging him to fight. Si Kong Tan was really afraid. He was afraid of Chu Xiu's strength, Chu Xiu's unfathomable depth, and he was afraid that Yuan Fu's jinx would take effect again. At this time, Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were also hesitating. They didn't have any enmity with Chu Xiu. It was only because of their friendship with Yuan Fu, and because they were attracted by the large number of tokens and soul crystals on Chu Xiu, that they made a move. Chu Xiu had been robbing unscrupulously for so long, but he didn't know that in the eyes of others, he was also a very good target to rob. But when Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong saw that Yuan Fu was actually injured so badly, and that even the ghost general died at the hands of Chu Xiu, they were a little uncertain. Even though they hadn't fought with Chu Xiu directly, they could still feel the powerful pressure. At this time, Chu Xiu recovered a little. He reached out and the ghost general's soul crystal was put into his bag. At the same time, Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Yuan Fu and the others, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a cold and creepy smile. You didn't leave? That's good. You don't have to leave anymore. Chapter 1254. Aura was a very mysterious thing. At the very least, Si Kong Tan could clearly feel that Chu Xiu had a kind of aura that made him shudder. He didn't think that he was afraid, but that his opponent was too strong, so strong that he didn't even have the courage to attack. He didn't leave just now, but now he couldn't. Killing intent rose in Chu Xiu's eyes. These guys had caused him a lot of trouble. If he didn't kill them now, when would he? Yuan Fu had succeeded, successfully arousing Chu Xiu's killing intent. The people he wanted to kill usually wouldn't be left until the next day. The misty slash slashed down with absolute blade intent, its sharpness making everyone's hearts tremble. Yuan Fu shouted, "This Chu Xiu is already so arrogant that he wants to drive us out. If we don't attack now, when will we?" Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang looked at each other, then put the heavily injured Yuan Fu aside, and the two of them went straight for Chu Xiu. Chen Jiolong's body shone with a strong golden light. With a dragon's roar, he seemed to have transformed into a soaring dragon, fighting against the heavens. As his claw descended, he actually used his physical body to take on Chu Xiu's misty slash head-on. Bursts of exploding blade light resounded around him, the sharpness scattering in all directions. Chen Jiolong came from the divine dragon subduing general's bloodline, and was most proficient in physical cultivation. Moreover, his bloodline's dragonization secret technique had gained 30% of the Azure Dragon's charm, and was always successful in close combat. But as he took on Chu Xiu's blade light head-on, Chen Jiolong's expression suddenly changed. The extreme sharpness tore through the scales formed from stellar energy around his body, and he was almost instantly killed. Su Jiang! Chen Jiolong shouted. Behind him, Su Jiang formed a hand seal, and moonlight shone on Chen Jiolong's body. In an instant, his body turned into a strange illusory state, and with a leap he rushed towards Chu Xiu like a swimming dragon. The dragon subduing divine general's lineage and venerable Guyu's lineage had actually been in contact for a long time. Not only were Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang good friends, but their ancestors had also been good friends for thousands of years. The dragon subduing divine general's lineage specialized in body tempering and close combat. Venerable Guyu's lineage, on the other hand, was proficient in all kinds of strange secret techniques. Their close combat abilities were not considered strong. Therefore, once the two of them joined forces, they complemented each other, and their battle prowess would multiply. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang had known each other since they were young. They grew up together and cultivated together even before they roamed the Jianghu. Now that they were fighting Chu Xiu together, they seemed to have a tacit understanding with each other. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed coldly when he saw Chen Jiolong's approaching figure. He had only overexerted his primordial spirit, but he still had a lot of power left in him. Facing Chen Jiolong, Chu Xiu slashed out once again. However, with the support of the moonlight, Chen Jiolong's movements seemed to have distorted the laws of this area, causing the ethereal slash to miss. Die! Chen Jiolong bellowed, and the dark red aura on his dragon claw tore through the void. The dragon fought in the wild, its blood yellow. It was an extreme blood chi that was even sharper than the edge of a blade. At this moment, Su Jiang formed a hand seal, and a half-moon rose into the sky. Under the illumination of the moonlight, black shadows rose from under Chuxiu's feet and wrapped around him, making him unable to move. Just as Chen Jiulong's dragon claw landed, Chuxiu finally moved. It was a simple punch, but the powerful force exploded to the extreme. With a loud bang, the golden light around Chen Jiulong shattered, and his dragon form was directly destroyed. At this moment, Chen Jiulong's eyes widened. Even though his internal organs had been shaken by the powerful force of Chuxiu's punch, he still could not believe that Chuxiu was stronger than him in terms of strength. He was so much stronger than him. In fact, Chen Jiulong felt that his physical strength was powerful only because he felt good about himself. There was no need to mention Chen Qingdi. After refining the demon god's blood, Chuxiu's strength had almost reached a state where he was invincible under the martial immortal realm. Although Chen Jiulong's physical body was strong, even stronger than the warriors of the war-fighting divine sect at the same level, there was still a huge gap between him and Chuxiu. At the same time, Chuxiu's celestial domain bloomed, and the black shadows around him were instantly killed. He moved and directly charged at Su Jiang. Between the two, Chen Jiulong was actually the easiest to deal with. However, with Su Jiang beside him, it would be extremely difficult to deal with him. Therefore he killed Su Jiang first. Chen Jiulong could kill him with a wave of his hand. The saber light slashed down. In shock, Su Jiang's body turned into a shadow of the moon and dissipated, causing his saber to miss. However, the next moment, Chuxiu formed a seal with his hand. In an instant, the tears of heaven blood rain suddenly descended. The powerful force enveloped the space within hundreds of feet. Under the blood rain, the moonlight was suppressed to the extreme, and could no longer help Su Jiang hide his body. The void was torn apart. The huge shadow of the demon god stretched out its hand and grabbed at Su Jiang. Su Jiang looked like he was holding the moon in his arms. The silver full moon blocked in front of him and shone brightly. The cold moonlight was purifying the power of the Great Compassion mantra. The power in the moonlight was not the power of Taoism or Buddhism to suppress evil and kill demons. Instead, it was a very strange power that was constantly assimilating different kinds of power. If Su Jiang's move was used against warriors of the same level, it would be a very strong move. Unfortunately, Chuxiu's power was too strong. Su Jiang could no longer resist the power of the Great Compassion mantra. Sweat appeared on his forehead. Seeing that Su Jiang could no longer resist, Chen Jiulong immediately gritted his teeth and rushed toward Chuxiu, ignoring the pain of his internal organs being shaken. His body transformed into a dragon, like a flying dragon in the sky. The attack from the sky directly brought about a powerful storm, letting out a series of dragon-like roars. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute power, it was still useless. It was still a simple punch with extreme power. In an instant, it sent Chen Jiulong flying backward, and the dragon-shaped qi on his body collapsed. Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong were definitely not weak. It could be said that they were not bad when facing disciples from top sections. It was a pity that they met Chuxiu. For the current Chuxiu, even if his condition was not good, he no longer cared about the existence of the ordinary mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Unless he encountered people like Xian Jialua or Fang Yizhen of the Three Pristines Palace, Chuxiu would really treat them as an opponent. Su Jiang gritted his teeth and shouted. His primordial spirit was seriously injured in the battle with Gui Jiang before. If I can use that move to break his defense, I can use the moon-leading soul technique to seriously injure his primordial spirit again. When Chen Jiulong heard this, he immediately knew which move Su Jiang was talking about. In an instant, he formed a seal with his hands, and his qi and blood erupted all over his body. On his exposed skin, layers of muscle patterns appeared in a strange manner, like scales. At the same time, Su Jiang also formed a seal with his hand, and the power of his gang qi and primordial spirit bloomed to the extreme, releasing waves of silver-white moonlight. His entire body was enveloped in the moonlight, as if a full moon had suddenly risen in the sunless central state. In the next moment, all the moonlight was injected into Chen Jiulong's body. In an instant, the moon danced and the dragon soared. This was no longer the form of gang qi, but a real dragon. With the moon as the dragon's soul, and Chen Jiulong's body as the dragon's body, Under the moon danced and the dragon soared. Chen Jiulong's figure could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a lifelike dragon that was hundreds of feet long, bringing with it the bright and cold moonlight, surging towards Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said softly, "Magic power, interesting." What Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang were using now was a magic power, and it was a real magic power. Among the Daoyuotian people, except for abnormal people like Chu Xiu, it was actually very difficult for most normal warriors to master a magic power at the mysterious enlightenment realm. This was because they could not withstand the power of the magic power's backlash, and even if they had mastered it, they did not dare to use it. But Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang were very creative. They actually divided a magic power into two halves, cultivated it separately, and then used it together. In this way, the two of them could bear the backlash together, and they could use the magic power smoothly like now. However, this required them to have a tacit understanding with the other party. Otherwise, the slightest bit of difference would make it impossible to succeed. But when he thought of the two men who had grown up together, were childhood sweethearts and cultivated together, and even had to cultivate to the point of tacit understanding, Chu Xiu felt a little awkward. Facing a magic power attack, Chu Xiu was still letting his imagination run wild. This action was not because he was underestimating his opponent, but because he was confident. In the next moment, he used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, and everything around him was devoured by Chu Xiu. When the thousands of feet tall demon god stood between the heavens and the earth, and even reached into the central ground's array formation, the dragon that Chen Jiulong had transformed into could only be considered a small loach at most. As Chu Xiu's fist landed, he was directly sent flying hundreds of feet away. The dragon disappeared, and the moon disappeared. Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang coughed up blood at the same time. Their eyes filled with horror. On the other side, Yuan Fu saw that the two of them were still being beaten up by Chu Xiu. Even if they used their trump cards, it would still be the same as before. He couldn't help but turn back and yell at Xikong Tan. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack." Seeing that both sides had even used their magic powers, Xikong Tan completely broke down. He had been cursing Yuan Fu the whole way, and now he finally let it out. "Attack your grandma's balls. You idiot arrogant fool. Did your brain get kicked by a donkey or squeezed by a door? Or were you born malnourished? You only know how to attack. Do you think you can beat him? If you're tired of living and want to die, I still have more than 10 wives and concubines. I don't want my son to take someone else's surname in the future." After cursing, Xikong Tan's figure moved, and he directly turned to escape, leaving behind a stunned Yuan Fu. However, before he could escape too far, a strange domain directly wrapped around him. The power of time in that domain seemed to have been messed up, and he couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. Suddenly, a slap came over, blasting him into the ground. An old man who looked like an old farmer with his hands behind his back slowly descended from midair. He said indifferently, "Little fatty, where do you think you're going?" Chapter 1255. The cultivator who had slapped Xikong Tan down was Shang Tianliang. Half-step martial immortal was like a fish in water, even in the central province. Therefore, Shang Tianliang did not encounter any danger during this period of time. He did not encounter any powerful high-grade demonic ghosts like Chu Xiu did. When he encountered Shang Tianliang, he had wanted to go to the central province's hinterland for a while. However, he happened to hear news about Chu Xiu. He had originally gone to the valley to find Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu was no longer there. All he saw were traces of battle. However, Shang Tianliang was not anxious. He believed in Chu Xiu's strength. Besides, good people do not live long. Scourges live for 1,000 years. He did not believe that someone like Chu Xiu would die here so easily. As expected, by the time he arrived, everything was over. Only a few pitiful fellows who were beaten up by Chu Xiu were left. Xikong Tan collapsed. Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong also collapsed when they saw Shang Tianliang. One Chu Xiu was already so difficult to deal with. Now there was another half-step martial immortal. He was clearly on the same side as Chu Xiu. How were they supposed to fight him? There was no way. Therefore, Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong quickly looked at each other. In an instant, the two of them made a decision. Su Jiang formed hand seals and poured the last of his moonlight power into Chen Jiulong's body. Chen Jiulong's physical strength instantly soared to the limit. Chen Jiulong leaped forward and unleashed his power to the limit. As he brought Su Jiang along, he extended his hand and pulled Yuan Fu along with him. The two of them were quite loyal. They did not forget Yuan Fu. Although Yuan Fu was not as close to them as they were good friends who had known each other for many years. They could not bear to leave Yuan Fu here alone. Besides, swordsman Ling Tian's faction had always been unreasonable. If they really left Yuan Fu here to fend for himself, Yuan Fu's master might come looking for trouble with their sect. Lord Shang stopped them. At the very least, leave the heavily injured one behind. Chu Xiu shouted in a low voice. The moment he used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's own strength was almost depleted. Therefore he did not give chase because he could not catch up. Fortunately, Shang Tianliang had arrived. With his half-step martial immortal cultivation, it would be very easy for him to stop them. However, Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang also knew that as long as they stayed, they would really die. Therefore, the two of them immediately began to flee. Chen Jiulong burned his blood essence, pushing his physical strength to a new peak. The golden dragon had already turned into a blood dragon. Su Jiang did the same. He directly ignited his blood essence, turning the silvery white moonlight into a blood-red color, and infusing it into Chen Jiulong's body. In the blink of an eye, the two's speed had increased by a large margin. Stay here for I. The withering glory domain spread out, and the power of time began to reverse. Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong were horrified to discover that the power within their bodies seemed to be out of their control, and began to burn violently. Throw Yuan Fu away. Su Jiang, who had always been gentle, suddenly shouted. Chen Jiulong was taken aback. Without any hesitation, he threw Yuan Fu to the ground. The two of them borrowed the explosive power of the withering glory domain to instantly leap forward. In a single leap, they had escaped the range of Shang Tianliang's domain, disappearing without a trace. Shang Tianliang was taken aback, unable to react. He also did not expect the two of them to have such explosive power. He was unable to completely burn their power, and instead allowed them to borrow the power of the withering glory domain to instantly bloom and escape. At that moment, Shang Tianliang looked behind him. The fatty that he had slapped to the ground earlier had also disappeared. Looking closely, there was actually a hole in the ground. Xikong Tan had actually used a secret technique to escape while Shang Tianliang was chasing Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang. There was a total of 4 people. One had already been crippled by Chu Xiu, and the other 3 had been half crippled by Chu Xiu. In the end, only one was left crippled by Shang Tianliang. That made Shang Tianliang feel a little embarrassed, and he wanted to give chase. City Lord Shang, there's no need to chase after them. Let them go. Right now, Chu Xiu's power and primordial spirit were severely depleted, and he urgently needed to recover. Moreover, the central province was full of danger. There was no point in chasing at this time, and it would only lead to accidents. Shang Tianliang snorted coldly. Give I time, and none of those 3 brats will be able to escape. Chu Xiu gave Shang Tianliang a way out. He nodded in agreement as he walked towards Yuan Fu. Seeing Chu Xiu walking towards him with killing intent, Yuan Fu was terrified, but he did not beg for mercy. He was the successor of Gu Zun, the successor of swordsman Ling Tian's bloodline. He could plot to kill Chu Xiu, and he could also lose, but he could not beg for mercy. Therefore, even under the fear of death, Yuan Fu still did not beg for mercy. Instead, he unyieldingly threatened. Chu Xiu, before you kill me, think carefully. Pft. With a soft sound, the formation-breaking sword pierced into Yuan Fu's heart. The sharp aura instantly shattered his heart meridians. Do I need to think about killing you? Shang Tianliang finally noticed Chu Xiu's current state. His primordial spirit and power were almost completely depleted. Although he was not seriously injured, he had already overdrawn his power. These 4 fellows actually forced you into such a state? Shang Tianliang was curious. Logically speaking, this should not be the case. With Chu Xiu's current strength, as long as he did not encounter a half-step martial immortal, He was practically invincible among his peers. Chu Xiu did not say a word. He only took out the ghost general's soul crystal. Shang Tianliang was immediately shocked. Just what did you kill? Previously, Shang Tianliang did not have much of an idea of the demonic ghost's strength. However, when he killed a few demonic ghosts and obtained the soul crystals that weighed a few taels, with the heaviest weighing only half a caddy, he finally realized how powerful the demonic ghosts were. The soul crystal that Chu Xiu took out now seemed to weigh at least 5 caddies. Just what kind of monster was that? It's just a high-level demonic ghost with a cultivation equivalent to a martial immortal. Shang Tianliang immediately stopped talking. He coughed and changed the topic. You've exhausted too much of your power. Let's not talk so much for now. Let's recover our power first. After Chu Xiu spent almost a day recovering his power and primordial spirit, he told Shang Tianliang everything that had happened since he entered the Central Plains. After hearing it, Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of pity. Chu Xiu was definitely the unlucky kind. As soon as he entered, he encountered a high-level demonic ghost. Then he was surrounded by Yuan Fu and the others. Not only did he fight 2 battles, but because he refined the soul crystal, he was targeted by the ghost general with a cultivation equivalent to a martial immortal. Shang Tianliang even dared to say that among all the martial artists who entered the Central Plains, Chu Xiu was the most unlucky one. By the way, City Lord Shang, what did you do after entering the Central Plains? Shang Tianliang thought for a moment and said, kill the demonic ghost and steal the token. That's it? Shang Tianliang glanced at Chu Xiu and said, that's normal. Apart from that, what else do you want? Chu Xiu choked. Indeed, 90% of martial artists should have such a routine. City Lord Shang, did you meet anyone else? Shang Tianliang said. I didn't meet anyone else, but I met Chen Qingdi. That guy basically had no opponents. As long as he met someone, he could get a token. As long as he met a demonic ghost, it was basically a kill. So, I only exchanged a few words with him. We didn't travel together. Shang Tianliang paused and added, by the way, you don't have to worry about the others. They all have their own tricks up their sleeves, so they should be fine. After all, not everyone is as unlucky as you. Chu Xiu was speechless. Shang Tianliang suddenly thought of something. He said to Chu Xiu with a serious expression, Boy Chu Xiu, be careful of the people from the Sanskrit sect. What's wrong with the Sanskrit sect? Shang Tianliang said. Previously, Tao Qiushui mentioned that some people will deliberately suppress their cultivation and only break through to martial immortal after entering the Central Plains. That's the case with Singalo from the Sanskrit sect. Furthermore, the Sanskrit sect used some unknown method to recruit 80% of their disciples in just a few days. So most of the martial artists from the Sanskrit sect in the Central Plains move in groups of 3 to 5. If they meet the people from the Sanskrit sect, most martial artists can only admit that they are unlucky and hand over their token. Everyone knows about the grudge between you and the Sanskrit sect. Singalo even tried to find your location. However, you are still considered lucky. Singalo's location is completely different from yours. Even if he knows you are here, it will take him some time to find you. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed coldly. If he really finds his way here, it's hard to say who will be the one to kill who. Shang Tianliang shook his head and said, with your current strength, you might not be at a disadvantage even if you face a first heaven martial immortal like Singalo. However, the problem is, do you think he is the only troublesome person from the Sanskrit sect? Several dozen people from the Sanskrit sect have come. Singalo has already recruited 80% of them. If they attack together, you won't be able to handle them. Chu Xiu nodded. Although he was reluctant to admit it, he made a mental note of it. Where do you plan to go next? Are you going to the center of the central province to find the others? Shang Tianliang asked. Chu Xiu said, don't be anxious. Earlier, after I killed the core of that ghost general, or rather, after I freed the cultivator from the battle god sect, he gave me a piece of information. It was the place where he died. There was a relic that he had obtained after fighting with others. From his tone, it should be an extremely precious item. I plan to retrieve it first before entering the center of the central province. Shang Tianliang frowned slightly and said, That guy has already become the core of the ghost general. Can his words be trusted? Don't think that it's a trap. Chu Xiu shook his head and said in a lecturing tone, City Master Shang, aren't your thoughts a little too dark? Why do you always think of people as bad? That's not good. A man's words are always kind when he's about to die. I believe he won't lie before his death. Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu speechlessly. Do you think you're qualified to say that I'm dark? Chapter 1256. Although Shang Tianliang felt that the thing that Chu Xiu wanted to find was a bit unreliable, he still believed in Chu Xiu's ability to read people, so he went with him to find that place. Although thousands of years had passed, the central state was only so big, so it was still very easy to find it. But that martial artist once said that there should be a high-grade demonic ghost guarding that place, and that he died at the hands of that high-grade demonic ghost when he was injured. But for Chu Xiu, this was not a difficult thing. In any case, he had killed more than one high-grade demonic ghost. Shang Tianliang asked, I have never encountered a high-grade demonic ghost. Tell me, what is so special about it? How should I deal with it? Chu Xiu thought for a moment, then said, The ghost general that I encountered before should be an extremely special existence. In the central state, there should not be such a demonic ghost. But other high-grade demonic ghosts, they are illusory, and it is very difficult to use absolute power to deal with them. So if you really want to kill a high-grade demonic ghost, the simplest way is to enter their rules, in the rules they have constructed, to find their weaknesses and loopholes. Although Chu Xiu did not encounter as many demonic ghosts as Shang Tianliang, but he had killed 2 high-grade demonic ghosts, this kind of experience was enough for Chu Xiu to infer some of the rules and clues about demonic ghosts. Just like that evil village he encountered before, from the moment he saw that village, he had already entered the rules of that demonic ghost. Normal people would not drink the severed finger corpse water that the old woman brought. Almost everyone would choose to turn hostile and kill all the demonic ghosts. But as soon as you make a move, you have already fallen into the trap. Endless killing will invade your heart, making you completely lost. So only by drinking the severed finger corpse water and letting yourself enter the rules can you find the loopholes. Shang Tianliang said thoughtfully, So the most important thing is the rules? Chu Xiu nodded. Yes, demonic ghosts are not the core is their rules. The rules of the central state are twisted, which is why things like demonic ghosts are born. Their very existence is twisted, but we are normal. If we use normal power to deal with these twisted monsters, of course, there will be all kinds of accidents. Only by entering their laws will we be able to completely annihilate them. The two of them continued their discussion as they headed in that direction. Unknowingly, the sky around them began to darken. Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang looked at each other. They had probably entered the demonic ghost's domain. After walking for less than 15 minutes, a dilapidated temple appeared in front of Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang. The red tiles of the temple were covered with a layer of dust, making them look like black tiles. The plaque hanging on the door was crooked and on the verge of falling. Looking closely, one could see that the name on it was Samsara Temple. Shang Tianliang raised his eyebrows and took the lead to knock on the door. After a long while, the door creaked open and a monk's head appeared. However, there were no eyes on the head. There were only 2 bloody holes, and scarlet blood was still flowing out of them. Half of his face was rotten, and there were maggots crawling on it, which looked extremely terrifying. The ghost monk grinned. This poor monk has been waiting for you for a long time. Please come in. Even Shang Tianliang's heart couldn't help but skip a beat at this sudden scene. When ordinary people saw this horrible scene, their subconscious reaction would be to scream. However, for a warrior like Shang Tianliang who had climbed out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, he was not afraid of the living, so how could he be afraid of a dead person? Therefore his subconscious reaction was to throw a punch, and at the same time he shouted, What kind of demons and ghosts are you? Go to hell? Subconsciously, Shang Tianliang completely forgot what Chu Xiu had said to him before, and smashed the ghost monk's head with one punch. Chu Xiu cursed inwardly. As expected, with this punch, the scenery around Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang instantly changed. They went from being outside the temple to being inside the temple, and the door was already tightly shut. Moreover, Countless monks surrounded them. Some were headless, some had their stomachs cut open, and some were like dried corpses. In any case, they were all extremely hideous. The ghost monk from before also walked over and shook his head. This poor monk wants to welcome you, but you want to kill this poor monk. This is not right. Shang Tianliang frowned and directly threw a punch at the door, but there seemed to be a layer of barrier around them, which completely offset the power of his punch. Looking at the group of ghost monks around him, Shang Tianliang's eyes revealed a hint of killing intent. He immediately wanted to use the Withering Glory domain to attack, but he was stopped by Chu Xiao. Master Shang, don't waste your energy. From the moment you attacked, we have already fallen into the rules of this demonic ghost. These things are real in your eyes, and they are also real in your perception, but they might be fake. You will only be wasting your energy if you make a move. Then what do you think we should do? Shang Tianliang said impatiently. Chu Xiao walked out and ignored the terrifying ghost monks in front of him, as if they were ordinary monks. He said lightly, "It is wrong for us to attack, but why don't you let us leave? Is this a temple or a bandit's nest?" The ghost monk put his palms together and said, "Buddha Mia, you may not know, but our reincarnation temple only has the door to enter, but there is no way out. If you want to go out, you must walk out of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Those who come in are people, but those who go out are not necessarily people." The ghost monk looked at Chu Xiao, and the rotten flesh on his face trembled, which made him look even more evil. "All right, then show us the so-called 6 paths of reincarnation." The group of ghost monks dispersed and led the way, bringing Chu Xiao and Shang Tianliang straight into the Mahavira Hall. However, in the Mahavira Hall of the Reincarnation Temple, what they worshipped was not a Buddha statue, but a huge wheel. The wheel was densely inscribed with Sanskrit, and there were 6 entrances that rotated continuously. When Shang Tianliang saw this thing, he could not help but feel his hair stand on end. "I say you are not going to enter it, are you?" Chu Xiao nodded and said, "Of course, otherwise why would I come here? I said that the demonic ghosts themselves are formed by the rules of the central planes. If you do not enter and feel their rules, how can you break through their rules? Master Shang, you should actually enter and give it a try. These demonic ghosts attack your state of mind, but at the same time, your state of mind will also become stronger in this kind of environment. This is also a kind of cultivation." Shang Tianliang curled his lips and said, "Forget it, I am not in the mood to be abused. Go ahead, I will protect you here." Chu Xiao did not insist and directly stepped into the 6 paths of reincarnation. In the next moment, the white light completely enveloped Chu Xiao. When he reappeared, he had become an old yellow bull, dragging a plow through the fields. Behind him, the whips of the farmers were constantly lashing at him. The pain was extremely real. Chu Xiao was like a spectator. He retained his original consciousness, but he couldn't do anything. On the other hand, the old ox's consciousness and all kinds of feelings could be transmitted into his mind. It was as if he really had another body. Interesting, as expected of a high-level demonic ghost. It is so lifelike, and even more ostentatious than the village from before. But what is the meaning of bringing me to the path of the beast for the first time? It is very unfriendly. Chu Xiao was like a cold spectator, experiencing the old yellow bull's life. He plowed the fields for others, but was repeatedly beaten up. He was so tired in the fields, but in exchange he did not rest and build up his strength, but under the butcher's knife, his flesh was cut and his bones were removed. Unwillingness. Injustice. Strong resentment filled Chu Xiao's heart, but he forcibly suppressed it. Another white light flashed, and Chu Xiao's figure appeared in hell. Countless vengeful souls and hungry ghosts were wailing. This time, he used his own body. He was tied to a stone pillar, and Magistrate Cui, who had a small mustache, pronounced his crimes. The criminal Chu Xiao, in the world of the living, has committed heinous crimes, killing without limit. He is a person who has committed the most heinous crimes. Send him to the 18th level of hell, never to reincarnate. As Magistrate Cui's voice fell, Chu Xiao was immediately brought to the 18th level of hell by the ghost messengers. He experienced the tongue-pulling hell, the scissors hell, the ice hell, the volcano hell, the endless purgatory, and many other tortures. The pain was clearly transmitted to Chuxio's body, but he forcibly suppressed it. He even had the mood to study some of the details in hell. As a martial artist, not just Chuxio, almost all of them had fought their way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Even those disciples of the big sects who grew up in a greenhouse might not have experienced much fighting, but from the beginning of martial arts cultivation, tempering the flesh and bones, condensing the true pellet, and refining the primordial spirit, which one of them was not painful? This degree of physical torture was not as troublesome as the resentment he suppressed in the path of the beast just now. Perhaps this demonic ghost was controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation. Seeing that the path of hell was useless to Chuxio, it immediately changed the scene. This time, Chuxio was reincarnated into the path of heaven. He was surrounded by embroidered clothes, delicacies, heavenly ladies, and flowers. There was no killing, no conflict. Everything was so peaceful. It was a sublimation of bliss, making one forget to return. This feeling was something that Chuxio, who had always fought and killed people in the pugilistic world, had never experienced before. It was a very novel feeling. Chuxio let out a long sigh. How can there be true bliss? Without true power, this so-called bliss is just a fleeting cloud. It can be shattered by a light slash. The peak of our martial arts cultivation is not to step on others, but to prevent others from stepping on us. Even if it is heaven and earth, it is not allowed. The next moment, the blissful path of heaven shattered. What appeared in front of Chuxio was a world filled with blood and murderous intent. The path of Azura. Chapter 1257. Compared to the unwillingness and resentment he had suffered in the animal realm, the various pains he had suffered in the hell realm, and the gentle bone-eroding knife of the celestial realm, the Azura realm was the one with the greatest lethality for Chuxio. There was only one theme in the Azura realm, and that was killing. Azuras were born to kill. They had no emotions, and only knew how to fight and kill. In the bloody pugilistic world, there was no lack of killing. Chuxio had killed countless people in his life, but he dared to say that he had not lost himself in this kind of killing. Killing for the sake of killing was the true loss. Fortunately, he had experienced the same scene in the ghost village, but he had held on in the end. So this time, the Azura realm could not do anything to Chuxio. The scene changed again, and this time, it was the hungry ghost realm. Countless thin and weak hungry ghosts with swollen bellies that looked like pregnant women wailed in the hungry ghost realm, craving for food. However, no matter how much food there was, it would not be able to fill their stomachs. What the hungry ghost realm represented was greed. It was endless greed. Chuxio was also greedy. It should be said that there was nothing that people did not desire. From the moment people were born, greed was engraved in the deepest part of their hearts. They could pluck fruits to fill their bellies, but they wanted to eat meat. So people invented knives and spears to hunt and kill living creatures. Cooked meat tasted better than raw meat, so people learned to use fire to make meat tastier. Everyone was greedy for better things, but it was also because of greed that people could become stronger. Chuxio was also greedy for power, greedy for freedom, and greedy for the highest realm. The only difference was that he could face this kind of greed. The power of the hungry ghost realm could not do anything to Chuxio. This kind of greed did not even need to be suppressed by Chuxio, because it was a part of his emotions, so why should he suppress it? Compared to the other 5 realms, the mortal realm was the most complicated one. Compared to the other 5 realms, the mortal realm was the most complicated one. In this life, Chuxio was reborn as a human. When he was young, his family was poor. His parents died early and he was bullied. It wasn't easy for him to study hard and become a talent, but he was suppressed by his superiors, and his future was bleak. When he reached middle age, he was mediocre. In the end, he gave up on his perseverance and conspired with them. However, he was despised by his wife and children, and in the end he became a loner. When the new emperor ascended to the throne and thoroughly investigated corruption, he was pulled out by the Shangguan as a scapegoat, and was beheaded at the entrance of the market. However, the people who cheered were the people he had saved when he was an upright official. Dozens of years in one's life. One's body is not in one's control. One's fate is not in one's control. Every detail seemed to be real, imprinted in Chu Xiu's mind, and he almost couldn't breathe. Ordinary illusions could not do anything to Chu Xiu, but in the 6 paths of reincarnation, everything he experienced was too real. It was so real that it was as if he was alive. In fact, he could even recall it clearly every day. In this life, he was not the demon lord Chu Xiu who dominated the lower worlds and the Dalyu Ocean, nor was he the martial arts expert who could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, and shatter mountains and rivers with his fists. When he was bullied and humiliated in his childhood, he was helpless. He could only grit his teeth and endure the humiliation. When he was suppressed by the Shangguan, he was helpless. In the face of power, people were like ants. When his wife and children did not understand him and left him, he could do nothing. The human heart was the most difficult to change. When he was finally beheaded at the entrance of the market, the feeling that even his life was not in his control was the most unbearable for Chu Xiu. In the mortal realm, being a human was the most difficult. Fortunately, in the 6 paths of reincarnation, Chu Xiu did not lose himself, and he managed to survive. Looking at the vast expanse of whiteness around him, Chu Xiu said lightly, "I've already tried the 6 paths of reincarnation. Are you still not going to show your real body?" As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared in front of him again. But this time, Chu Xiu was directly thrown into the mortal realm and reincarnated. At this moment, Chu Xiu's expression changed. He had underestimated this demonic ghost, or rather, he had missed one thing. Before the martial arts expert of the war-battling god sect dissipated, he had indeed told Chu Xiu this news out of good intentions. He wanted to thank him, not to deceive him. In his opinion, Chu Xiu was the only one in the past thousands of years who could fight the ghost general head-on, find its weakness, and free it. Chu Xiu's strength was comparable to that of a martial immortal, so it would not be a problem for him to deal with a normal high-level demonic ghost and obtain the item. And Chu Xiu actually thought so too, so along the way, Chu Xiu was very calm, as if he was not going to face a high-level demonic ghost but to dig for treasures. But he had overlooked one thing. That was something that happened thousands of years ago. Although demonic ghosts were not humans, they would also become stronger with the passage of time. Because the attack methods of demonic ghosts were somewhat unpredictable, Dalyu Ocean martial arts experts simply divided demonic ghosts into low-level, mid-level, and high-level. Low-level demonic ghosts were demonic ghosts that had just been born. Their abilities were simple and crude, and martial arts experts of the true fire spirit refinement realm could easily kill them. Mid-level demonic ghosts could already infiltrate people's minds and create illusions, and martial arts experts of the true fire spirit refinement realm could lose their lives if they were not careful. And high-level demonic ghosts could threaten the existence of the mysterious enlightenment realm of heaven and earth, so they had to be treated with even more caution. As for the ones above the high-level demonic ghosts, there was no need to talk about them. However, high-level demonic ghosts also had different levels of strength. This thing had been a high-level demonic ghost since a few thousand years ago. How much had its current strength improved compared to a few thousand years ago? Chu Xiu did not have time to think too much. The experiences and memories of one life after another were forcibly stuffed into his mind. The 7 sufferings of life: birth, aging, illness and death, love and hate, resentment and separation, and unattainable. Chu Xiu experienced these things over and over again. He wanted to forget them, but he could not. Even in the end, Chu Xiu was a little muddle-headed, and gradually forgot that he was Chu Xiu, the devil lord who dominated the Jianghu, and became a member of this samsara, wasting his life. In the samsara temple, the ghost monks all had extremely strange smiles on their faces, which made Shang Tianliang's hair stand on end. Chu Xiu had already entered for 2 hours. Why had he not come out yet? Although Shang Tianliang did not enter, his senses told him that the 6 paths of reincarnation were very dangerous. Even if he had confidence in Chu Xiu, he was a little uncertain at that moment. At that moment, in the samsara, Chu Xiu did not know how many lives he had experienced, and how much suffering he had experienced. His mind was almost filled with those memories. However, at that moment, a word suddenly popped up in Chu Xiu's mind. Duguweiwei. He had his own memories, but he was Dugu Weiwei's earthly soul doppelganger. Was he Dugu Weiwei? The heavenly soul had Dugu Weiwei's martial arts inheritance, Dugu Weiwei's body, and all of Dugu Weiwei's memories. Was he heavenly soul or Dugu Weiwei? Why am I me? Why am I me? How can I know who I am? Is it my body, my primordial spirit, or my memories? Chu Xiu was not a person who liked to think too much. In the past, he would definitely not think too much about bickering. However, today it suddenly surfaced in his mind. In the cycle of reincarnation, Chu Xiu was a street vendor in this life. He was born into poverty and was illiterate. It was not easy for him to survive in troubled times, and he even had to suffer the humiliation of the soldiers and gangs in the city. In front of him, a gangster kicked over his stall and said fiercely, "Young man, have you paid this month's money? If you don't pay, I will beat you up every time I see you if you dare to appear on this street again." However, what made the gangster feel strange was that the young man in front of him did not panic. Instead, he laughed. He laughed so hard that the gangster's hair stood on end. "Young man, have you lost your mind? Why are you laughing?" Chu Xiu raised his head. There was no fear or confusion in his eyes. They were extremely clear. There is no proof of Bodhi. Today, I know that I am me. I'm me, I'm Chu Xiu. What's there to ask for? As soon as he finished speaking, the gangster's body began to shatter. The whole city and the whole world were shattering. The 6 paths of reincarnation had collapsed. In the outside world, just as Shang Tianliang was feeling a little uncertain, Chu Xiu suddenly appeared in front of him, giving him a fright. However, before he could speak, everything around him was dissipating. Those terrifying and ferocious ghost monks were dissipating, and so was the Samsara temple. What was left on the ground were only 2 lifelike corpses. One was a monk. Judging from his clothes, he should be from the heavenly Luo treasure temple. The other was the warrior from the war-fighting sect. Shang Tianliang said in surprise, "You dealt with the demonic ghost? How did you deal with it? Was the previous incarnation of the demonic ghost this monk?" "As I said, if you want to deal with the demonic ghost, you just have to enter his rules. I broke his rules so naturally, I dealt with the demonic ghost." As Chu Xiu spoke, he took out a bracelet next to the monk's corpse. The bracelet seemed to be made of gold. There were 6 gems inlaid on it, and various strange Sanskrit characters were engraved around it. Chu Xiu sighed and said, that demonic ghost wasn't transformed from the monk, but from the bracelet's artifact spirit. Strange, truly strange. Shang Tianliang was also a little speechless. Chu Xiu did seem to be different from ordinary people. There were special existences among the demonic ghosts, but there were definitely not many of them. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, had encountered a total of 3 high-level demonic ghosts. In the end, 2 of them were special. At this moment, Chu Xiu wore the bracelet on his wrist. In the next instant, a strange light flashed. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the 6 paths of reincarnation revolved unceasingly, causing those who looked at it to involuntarily be drawn into it. Shang Tianliang only took a glance, and his spirit seemed to have experienced many years. He immediately shook his head and said in shock, "What is this thing? The artifact spirit of this thing has dissipated, but it still has such strong power?" Chu Xiu shook the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet and said, "Its artifact spirit has dissipated, but in my hand, I am its artifact spirit. Whatever the artifact spirit can control, I can control." As I said, there are benefits to actively enter the rules of those demonic ghosts and compete with them. Now look, the benefits are here. Chapter 1258. If he killed other demonic ghosts, Chu Xiu would only get soul crystals. But if he killed this demonic ghost, Chu Xiu would get something more worthwhile than soul crystals. The demonic ghost in the reincarnation temple was extremely special. Because it was transformed from a device spirit, it did not leave a soul crystal after its death. Instead, it left its body, which was the bracelet that Chu Xiu named the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. Chu Xiu did not know what the bracelet was used for before. But now, after Chu Xiu had experienced the baptism of the 6 paths of reincarnation, his own power could already communicate with the bracelet. In other words, as long as he got the bracelet, Chu Xiu could use the power of his primordial spirit as a guide to pull it into the 6 paths of reincarnation. In other words, Chu Xiu could directly control the power of the demonic ghost in the reincarnation temple. And that was not all. Before, although Chu Xiu's state of mind was not weak, there were actually some problems. After learning the truth about his life, he felt a constant pressure pressing on him. Heavenly Soul could not be completely trusted, and his future was uncertain. Chu Xiu did not know whether he would become a part of Dugu Weiwa, or be devoured in the future. Thus, during that period of time, Chu Xiu's state of mind had even become unbalanced. It was all thanks to Patriarch Blood River's timely arrival that allowed him to go on a killing spree and vent the depression in his heart. Only then did his state of mind calm down slightly. After experiencing everything in the 6 paths of reincarnation, Chu Xiu could be considered to have benefited from the disaster and understood many things. How could there be enlightenment? Today, I know that I am who I am. Regardless of whether Chu Xiu was Dugu Weiwei's Earth Soul doppelganger, and regardless of what Chu Xiu's memory looked like, whether it was his previous life or this life, right now he was only Chu Xiu, and could only be Chu Xiu. The tempering of one's state of mind was a very miraculous thing. It was formless and intangible. It could not be seen or touched. However, from the inexperienced martial artists to the peak experts of the 9th level of martial immortal realm, everyone's state of mind would be tempered at all times as long as they were in the world of mortals. At that moment, Shang Tianliang sighed. They all say that the central province is dangerous. Now I believe them. The monks of this heavenly Civ treasure monastery should have already reached the martial immortal realm. Yet, they died here. Chu Xiu said in astonishment. His body has already decayed. How can you tell he's a martial immortal? Shang Tianliang pointed to the Kasaya on the corpse and said, Boy, you've been in the Daoyu Ocean for so long before me. Don't you know some general knowledge? In the heavenly Civ treasure monastery, only martial immortals are qualified to wear golden Kasayas. Profound understanding cultivators wear red. Clearly, this person was also suppressing his strength. He only stepped into the martial immortal realm after entering the central province. Chu Xiu nodded in a pensive manner. Then, he went to search the body of the martial god sex cultivator. He had a secret spatial box on him. It was likely protected by a formation. However, since he was in the central province, no formation could be used outside. Thus, Chu Xiu was able to easily open it. Other than the various cultivation resources and medicinal pellets used for healing, there was only one thing that caught Chu Xiu's attention. It was a damaged steel. However, there was a sharp glint on it. If weaker cultivators were to stand beside the steel, they would easily be injured by the sharp glint on the steel. After taking a glance at the words on the steel, Chu Xiu quickly imprinted them into his mind. After a long while he took a deep breath and said, 7 limits. Heaven devouring. What was recorded on the stone tablet was the strongest move of the 7 limits of devouring the heavens and exterminating the earth. Heaven devouring. Although there were not many detailed records of the 7 limits in the history of the Daoyu Ocean Kingdom, and they were mostly legends, there were people who had obtained the 7 limits in the past. According to them, the strongest of the 7 limits, Heaven devouring, was more powerful than the sum of the other 6. It was one of the few powerful blade techniques that could use a pure martial skill to fight against a true divine ability. Unfortunately, the legend of the 7 limits had spread far and wide. The last master of Heaven devouring had apparently died an unnatural death, and the technique had been lost ever since. But now, it seemed that the last master of Heaven devouring had died in the central province for some unknown reason. It had then been obtained by the cultivator from the war god sect, and after several thousand years, it had finally fallen into Chu Xiu's hands. This thing was indeed a supreme treasure, and its power was comparable to a divine ability. It was no wonder that the cultivator from the war god sect had fought with others for it, even risking his life. In the end, he had been gravely injured and died at the hands of the demon ghost. As he thought of this, Chu Xiu suddenly realized that the legend of the 7 limits devouring wasn't groundless after all. The cultivator from the war god sect should have been qualified to compete for the exalted divine palace, but he had died at the hands of a high-grade demon ghost right after obtaining the 7 limits. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? However, Chu Xiu wasn't too worried. He had a tough life. He had already learned 2 of the 7 limits of sea-shattering and earth-shattering, and he was still alive and well. Another one wouldn't be a big deal. After putting away the items, Chu Xiu buried the cultivator from the War God sect and the monk from the Tianluo temple. Since he had taken someone else's things, he had to let them rest in peace. As for the monk from the Tianluo temple, he wasn't a demon ghost, and Chu Xiu had taken the monk's 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, which could be considered karma. Even though he had always disliked the monks of the Buddhist sect, Chu Xiu still respected the dead very much. Let's go into the central province and meet up with the others. With a wave of his hand, Chu Xiu led Shang Tianliang in the direction of the central province. However, Chu Xiu didn't know if it was fate that brought him to monks. He had just buried the monk, but within a day, he encountered another 2 groups of monks. Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang stood at the bottom of the cliff. Below them, 3 cultivators from the Sanskrit sect were besieging a cultivator from the Tianluo temple. All of them had the strength of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, and they were qualified to enter the central province. They belonged to the upper echelons of the 2 sects, so there wouldn't be any weaklings among them. Their strength was about the same, and the monk from the Tianluo temple was in a precarious situation. The monk from the Tianluo temple was a middle-aged monk. From his appearance, he seemed to be cultivating his body, which was similar to the Great Light Temple in the lower world. At this moment, he was forced to the extreme. He let out a roar, and the red kasaya on his body was directly torn apart, revealing his lean upper body. Dazzling golden Sanskrit characters appeared on his skin one after another, making him look like he was plated with a layer of gold. One of the monks from the Sanskrit sect opened his territory, and the strange black demonic fog turned into 1,000 giant snakes, gnawing at the golden Buddhist light. He sneered and said, "Lesser invincible golden body?" Using the Sanskrit totem of a martial immortal to forcefully perform the invincible golden body is just a trick. Monk Fa Ming, didn't the Tianluo temple always say that the people from the Sanskrit sect like to use unorthodox methods and tricks? You're only at the mysterious heaven and earth realm to forcefully master the invincible golden body. Aren't you also using tricks? The monks from the Tianluo temple are all hypocrites. Monk Fa Ming was unmoved, and he only said coldly, "The technique is for one's own use, so what's the point of using tricks? I endured the pain of the Sanskrit characters entering my body, and mastered the lesser invincible golden body, just to use this technique against heretics like you. And the Sanskrit sect cultivates all kinds of evil techniques as your foundation. Do you think you can compare to me?" A Sanskrit cultivator with a human body and a lion's head behind him snorted. The monks from the Tianluo temple are so stubborn. There's no need to waste words with them. Let's kill one first. Although the Tianluo temple sent more people than our Sanskrit sect this time, they've already been wiped out. Palace Master Shingala has ordered that the Tianluo temple's forces must be wiped out in this contest for the exalted divine palace. Not a single one of them is allowed to leave the central province. As the burly man's voice fell, the lion-headed demon god behind him roared, and the surrounding power of heaven and earth dissipated with his roar. Another warrior from the Sanskrit sect formed a seal with his hand, causing an endless amount of world-extinguishing fire to bloom out, wrapping around Fa Ming. At the same time, he held the triple annihilation city arrow in his hand, staring at Fa Ming. Once he found an opening in his opponent's defense, he would immediately shoot the arrow. Shang Tianliang couldn't help but shake his head as he watched the fierce battle between the 2 sides. These monks are really ruthless. They don't hesitate to kill their own people. It seems that the Great Radiance Temple and Subodhi Monastery in the lower realm are quite peaceful. One is in the south, the other in the north. They haven't fought much, but sometimes they even exchange teachings. Of course, now that they've been destroyed by you, there's no chance for them to exchange teachings. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Wrong. Only the Tianluo temple is a monk. To be precise, those from the Sanskrit are monks, not monks. Their orthodoxies are different, so they're destined to fight to the death. Although the Great Radiance Temple and Subodhi Monastery have their differences, their orthodoxies are exactly the same. Of course, they won't fight so fiercely. As the two sides spoke, the outcome of the battle had already been decided. Fei Ming wasn't weak. He could use a portion of the power of his supernatural powers at the ethereal enlightenment realm. In a one-on-one fight, none of the three from the Sanskrit sect was a match for him. However, it was 3 against 1. Even though Fei Ming had used his full strength, it was still useless. The 3 of them were determined to kill him, and Fei Ming didn't even have a chance to escape. Fei Ming's eyes revealed a determined murderous intent. He was ready to use the power of his qi and blood to destroy the Sanskrit inscriptions on his body. Even if he died, he would drag a heretic down with him. At this moment, Chu Xiu's body moved and he leaped down the cliff. He held the Vairocana seal in his hand and a Buddha's light bloomed. Monk Fei Ming was in despair when the Buddha's light blasted towards the 3 people, forcing them to retreat. Shang Tianliang looked at the scene below with a dumbfounded expression. He still couldn't react. He had seen Chu Xiu kill monks, but Chu Xiu actually saved monks. What was the meaning of this? Chapter 1259. Chu Xiu's sudden attack stunned not only Shang Tianliang, but also Fei Ming. When he saw the Vairocana seal fall, Fei Ming, who was in despair, thought that a fellow disciple of the heavenly Luo temple had come to save him. He did not expect it to be an unfamiliar martial artist. Looking at Chu Xiu's appearance, he was definitely not from the Sanskrit sect, but why would he come to save him, and why would he know his Buddhist cultivation method? But at this time, when the 3 Sanskrit martial artists saw Chu Xiu's face, they were stunned for a moment, then they said in surprise, "Chu Xiu, it's you." The reason the Sanskrit people recognized Chu Xiu was not because Chu Xiu's fame had reached a level that could shock the Western region, but because Xi and Jialua had told them to pay attention to Chu Xiu before they came here. If they found traces of Chu Xiu, they should kill him if there were many, escape if there were few. It would be best if they could capture him alive, but if not, they should seal his true spirit and take his head back. Xi and Jialua knew about Chu Xiu's strength, so he meant that groups of heaven and earth mysterious realm martial artists could surround and kill Chu Xiu, while those with few could just escape. But these 3 people misunderstood Xi and Jialua's meaning. Or maybe Xi and Jialua did not make it clear. From their point of view, they had 3 people on their side, which was already a lot. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's side only had 1 person, in addition to the heavily injured monk Fei Ming. They were definitely the side with fewer people. The martial artist with the 1,000-head snake in the domain sneered. "Chu Xiu, do you know that Master Xi and Jialua is also looking for you? We didn't go looking for trouble with you, but now you have taken the initiative to come to us. Today, when we get rid of Fei Ming, we will also get rid of you." At this time, most of the golden Sanskrit characters around Fei Ming's body had broken, but he struggled to say, "Benefactor, do you also have a grudge with the Sanskrit sect? They have the advantage in numbers. This penniless monk is now an arrow at the end of its flight, and doesn't have much combat strength left. You should leave. This penniless monk will stall them here. I only hope that when Benefactor meets the people of my heavenly Luo treasure monastery in the future, tell them about this penniless monk's death, and ask them to avenge this penniless monk." Monk Fei Ming didn't recognize Chu Xiu, but in his opinion, Chu Xiu had used a Buddhist technique at the critical moment, and he had a grudge against Sanskrit, so he must be on his side. Therefore, he had a good impression of Chu Xiu, and he couldn't bear to see Chu Xiu die here. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I can't do that. Master Fei Ming, you should talk to the other masters of the Heavenly Treasure Temple personally." Seeing that Chu Xiu didn't seem to put them in his eyes, the cultivator controlling the 1,000-headed snake said coldly, "Kill Chu Xiu first. He is the person Master Xi and Jiala wants." As soon as the cultivator's voice fell, the black snake in his domain suddenly issued a shrill scream, and the black snake turned into a boundless thick fog that instantly surrounded Chu Xiu. But before the remaining 2 cultivators could act, Chu Xiu had already moved. The next moment, a golden Buddha's light rose from Chu Xiu's body, and a Vairocana Dharma idol appeared behind him. The true fire of the sun stained the Buddha's light and burned away all the evil forces in the world. Chu Xiu took a step forward and instantly arrived in front of the cultivator, punching him. The black fog around the cultivator condensed into chains, but upon a closer look, they turned out to be snake heads. However, under the absolute power of Chu Xiu, these snake heads were instantly smashed to pieces by Chu Xiu's punch. Even the cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. At this moment, the other two cultivators finally reacted. The world annihilation fire under Chu Xiu's feet burned fiercely, and at the same time, a roar shook his spirit. But unfortunately, this level of attack had almost no effect on Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had already deduced the world annihilation fire to an extremely deep level. Even if the palace lord of Mahakala deity palace was here, he might not be as strong as Chu Xiu, let alone the others. As for the other person's soul attack, Chu Xiu, who had refined the soul crystal and tempered his mental state to an extremely tough state of mind in the 6 paths of reincarnation, did not have to worry about it at all. He could just take it head-on. In the next moment, they were shocked to find that the world annihilation fire actually took the initiative to avoid Chu Xiu, and the sound wave of the lion roar seemed to have no effect on Chu Xiu at all. Chu Xiu punched again, smashing all the black fog in front of the cultivator. His left hand grabbed the cultivator's neck and lifted him up. Under the horrified gaze of the cultivator, there was a loud bang, and the cultivator's head had already been smashed. Fa Ming, who was standing behind Chu Xiu, watched the scene with his mouth agape. These 3 Sanskrit cultivators were all at the level of a palace lord in the Sanskrit sect. Even if they weren't as strong as Xianjialua, they were still not ordinary people. But in the end, they were killed by Chu Xiu with just a few punches and kicks. Although Chu Xiu's last move was a little cruel, Fa Ming was very happy to see it. When it came to other people, the Heavenly Luo Temple would still pay attention to the principle of forgiving people wherever possible, and what it meant to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. But for the heretics of the Sanskrit sect, as long as they existed, it was a humiliation to the Heavenly Luo Temple. After killing one person in the blink of an eye, Chu Xiu suddenly stomped on the empty space in front of him. A small black snake hidden on the ground was smashed by Chu Xiu's stomp, and it actually let out a miserable howl like a human. If you want to die, die cleanly. Do you think you can resurrect in a place like the Central Province that is full of demonic ghosts with these little tricks? The cultivator who controlled the world annihilation fire, and the cultivator with a lion's head and a human body looked at each other. At the same time, they saw incomparable shock and panic in each other's eyes. Half-step martial immortal. This time, Xianjialua had caused them a lot of trouble. If they had known that Chu Xiu was a half-step martial immortal, even if they had twice as many people, they still wouldn't have dared to attack him. At this moment, the two of them had already lost their will to fight. They immediately burst forth with their fastest speed, turned around, and fled. Chu Xiu didn't chase after them. The array destruction tool appeared in his hand, and he slashed down with it. The ultimate sharpness suddenly descended. It was invisible and intangible, but the entire heaven and earth shone with a sharp light, illuminating the entire sky. The ethereal slash that was unleashed at full force was already in existence that was close to a divine power. The Sanskrit cultivator who used the world annihilation fire suddenly touched his neck. The next moment, his gaze suddenly fell to the ground. Under the slash, his head had been separated from his body. As for the cultivator with a lion's head and a human body, even though he couldn't find a trace of the ethereal slash's slash before it reached him, he still burst forth with his greatest potential at this critical moment of life and death. His hands moved quickly, and in the next moment, the Dharma power behind him blossomed with a vivid golden light. In an instant, he switched positions with his Dharma power, and the Dharma power with a human body and a lion's head was instantly decapitated and torn apart, turning into earth energy and dissipating. In shock, the cultivator immediately formed a hand seal, and the crimson light around him and the golden light of his primordial spirit burst forth at the same time. In an instant, he chose to burn his blood essence and primordial spirit to escape. He was truly afraid. He had seen half-step martial celestials before. With the Sanskrit strength, there was no lack of heaven and earth enlightenment realm cultivators in the sect, and he had seen more than one half-step martial celestial. But now Chu Xiu's strength was so strong that it made him shudder. Even when Xian Jialua was a half-step martial celestial, he was no match for Chu Xiu. Killing heaven and earth enlightenment realm cultivators was as easy as slaughtering chickens and dogs, and Chu Xiu killed one person with a single slash. This terrifying strength made him wonder if he was facing a martial celestial expert. However, in the next moment he felt that something was amiss. Why was he burning his blood essence and primordial spirit so quickly? Why did he obtain so much power? They had all reached the heaven and earth enlightenment realm, so they should not have too much control over their own power. He wanted to stop burning his blood essence and primordial spirit, but he was shocked to find that the power of burning his blood essence and primordial spirit was too strong. It was so strong that he could not control it. Even if he suppressed it with all his strength, he could only slow it down for a while. At that moment, he suddenly felt a strong gust of wind from a fist coming from beside him, stirring the void. He subconsciously turned around and punched out as well, but that power seemed to have found an outlet, and exploded with a loud bang. His body couldn't even withstand this powerful force, and directly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Shang Tianliang descended from the sky and shook his head. He said, "Poor child, why are you running? The faster you run, the faster you die. Haven't you heard of this saying?" Fa Ming, who was behind them, was stunned. Where did these two half-step martial celestials come from? After a while, Fa Ming came to his senses. He took out a red kasaya and put it on. He bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "I'm Fa Ming from the Heavenly Jewel Temple. Thank you, almsgiver Chu, for saving my life. May I know which sect you are from?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I'm from the eastern region. I'm Gu Zun's descendant, and I'm the prefectural governor of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Master Fa Ming, you don't have to worry about it. As you can see, I have a grudge against the Brahma sect's new Vishnu temple master, Singala. He wants to kill me. Therefore, when I saw the Brahma sect's people, I had to attack. And as you can see, Master Fa Ming, I know a Buddhist cultivation method. 10,000 years ago, when I was in the lower world, my lineage had some connection with the Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple. I learned some Buddhist martial arts, and our relationship is very close. Naturally, I can't watch Master Fa Ming be targeted by the people of Sanskrit." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Fa Ming immediately had a good impression of him. It was normal if the other party wanted to use this matter to ask for repayment. A favor from the Heavenly Jewel Temple was very valuable. Among all the Daluotian sects, except for the Three Pristines Temple, the Heavenly Jewel Temple was not afraid of anyone. However, the more Chu Xiu said it casually, the more Fa Ming admired him. He felt that Chu Xiu, the descendant of the Pristines Temple, was an upright person. Chapter 1260. When Shang Tianliang saw Chu Xiu hypocritically chatting with the monk, he couldn't help but have a strange expression on his face. He knew the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Buddhist sections. In the lower realms, they fought to the death. Now that he has come to the Daluotian kingdom, how did he become a friend of the Buddhist sects? What bullshit karma! The Buddhist techniques that Chu Xiu possesses were either stolen or deceived. How could he have the nerve to talk about karma with someone else? Of course, Shang Tianliang didn't expose Chu Xiu. He stood there with a straight face and put on the appearance of a senior expert. Chu Xiu looked at monk Fa Ming and asked, "Grandmaster Fa Ming, why aren't you together with the other monks of the Heavenly Luo Temple?" Monk Fa Ming forced a smile and said, "Before we agreed to meet at a place in the center of the central province. Although the geography of the central province will change, the general area will not change. However, I was quite unlucky and was teleported a bit far. On the way, I encountered a few demonic ghosts and was delayed. Now that the agreed time is almost up, I still haven't arrived." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "In that case, Grandmaster Fa Ming, you must be careful." Fa Ming was startled. "Careful of what?" Chu Xiu pointed to the corpse of the Brahmin sect martial artist and said, "Of course it's the people from the Brahmin sect. Grandmaster Fa Ming, you couldn't possibly be thinking that you were simply unlucky to encounter 3 Brahmin sect martial artists together, right? The central province is so big, and there are also many people who entered it. How could it be such a coincidence that 3 Brahmin sect martial artists met in the outskirts? I have already received news that the Brahmin sect's Vishnu Palace's temple master Singalyuo has entered the martial immortal realm. Moreover, Singalyuo has grasped a secret technique that allows him to detect the whereabouts of the Brahmin sect martial artists within the range of the central province. Thus, when we were still wandering around, the people from the Brahmin sect had already banded together in groups of 3 to 5 to rob the cultivators that were passing by. Now that we've killed 3 people, it could mean that there are more martial artists from the Sanskrit sect in this area. They might even know about it. Fa Ming was taken aback when he heard that. Then he cursed. The Sanskrit bastards never follow the rules. Damn them. Shang Tianliang pursed his lips when he heard that. Who would abide by the rules when there was a good thing in front of them? If the heavenly net treasure Buddha really abided by the rules, it probably wouldn't have come to this. At this time, Chu Xiu cupped his hands towards Fa Ming and said, Master Fa Ming, please be careful. This one will also have to bid farewell here. I also need to find my companions and meet up with them at the center of the central province. Hearing that Chu Xiu was about to leave, Fa Ming thought of something and hurriedly said, Young Master Chu, please wait a moment. Oh, is there anything else, Master Fa Ming? Monk Fa Ming said. Young Master Chu, since you have a grudge with Sanskrit's Xian Jialua, with his domineering personality, he will definitely make a move against you in the Central Plains. The people of the Sanskrit are narrow-minded and ruthless. They never follow the rules. Young Master Chu, although you are strong, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. How about this? Young Master Chu, join forces with the heavenly net treasure Buddha, and fight against the Sanskrit together. What do you think? Fa Ming looked at Chu Xiu with a longing gaze. He had suddenly thought of this. If the people from the Sanskrit sect were to join forces, he would probably be killed by them before he could even reach the center of the middle province. However, if he went with Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang, who were both half-step martial immortals, they would be invincible as long as they didn't run into Xian Jialua. Of course, Fa Ming wasn't just thinking for himself. He was afraid of death. He was also thinking for the interests of the heavenly net treasure Buddha. They didn't expect the Sanskrit to have such a trick up their sleeves. So in the competition for the tokens and soul crystals, the heavenly net treasure Buddha was already at a disadvantage. Moreover, there was no guarantee that the people of the Sanskrit had already started attacking the people of the heavenly net treasure Buddha in other places. The others wouldn't be as lucky as him. Therefore, the heavenly net treasure Buddha was at a disadvantage in the opening of the exalted divine palace. If they could rope in the 2 half-step martial immortals to their side, they would have a higher chance of winning against the Sanskrit. Shang Tianliang, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but shake his head inwardly. The monk of the heavenly net treasure Buddha was clearly the kind of monk who only knew how to fight and kill. He was definitely not the kind of monk who would care about other people's affairs. Even Shang Tianliang knew that when discussing cooperation, one must first see the benefits. For example, if they killed the people of the Sanskrit, how would they distribute the tokens and soul crystals? Both sides were from different camps. If they really fought, who would be the main attacker and who would be the commander? He didn't even explain these things clearly. How could it be that easy to join forces with an enemy's enemy was a friend? Even if Shang Tianliang wasn't proficient in these things, he had seen Chu Xiu form alliances so many times. He knew how to speak in such a situation. This monk was a bit too straightforward. However, Chu Xiu seemed to be moved. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, Since Reverend Fa Ming has said so, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Fa Ming was also overjoyed. After finalizing the deal, both sides immediately set off to avoid trouble. Shang Tianliang followed beside Chu Xiu and sent him a voice transmission. What the hell are you doing? Didn't you say you were going to find someone? Why are you working with the monks of the heavenly net treasure Buddha now? Chu Xiu's expression didn't change. Don't make it sound so bad. What do you mean by working with them? We're just working together. Fa Ming is right. It's easy to deal with Xian Jialua alone, but it'll be difficult to deal with all the cultivators of the Sanskrit. Even if we find Chen Qing Di and the others and gather them together, they still outnumber us. It just so happens that the people of the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha are begging us to work together. Why not? Shang Tianliang stared at Chu Xiu. He was sure that Chu Xiu definitely had other plans that he hadn't said. If it was purely to find the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha to work together, Chu Xiu wouldn't have put in so much effort and put on a show in front of Fa Ming. As expected, Chu Xiu paused and said, "Also, don't forget that the Sanskrit is not our only enemy in the Central Plains. I have a grudge with the Southern region martial world. I even crippled a cultivator of the Battle God sect, so in theory, the Battle God sect and the Kiliakosm sect could attack me. Also, I killed Yuan Fu. I heard that Sword Venerable Ling Tian's faction is good friends with the Sword sect under the heavens. They often exchange sword skills. If they find out about this, do you think they will attack me? Also, because you were too slow, the two descendants of the Primal Venerables escaped. This is also a problem. I'm just a fake descendant of the Primal Venerables, but they are the real deal. The descendants of the Primal Venerables all have their own circle, but I don't. So if they escaped, they might provoke someone else. Also, when I was robbing there before, I also robbed quite a number of rogue cultivators. I reckon that they hate me to the core." Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, "So we have a lot of enemies in the Central Plains, and the Sanskrit is not the only one. If something happens to the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha, I believe that these enlightened monks won't be so shameless as to abandon me, right?" Shang Tianliang broke out in a cold sweat. He even forgot to refute Chu Xiu's accusation that he was too slow, allowing the two descendants of the Primal Venerables to escape. He had already overestimated Chu Xiu's ability to attract hatred, but now it seemed that he had underestimated Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had only been in the Central Plains for a short period of time, but he had almost offended everyone he could. This was also a kind of ability. Thinking of this, Shang Tianliang couldn't help but look at Fa Ming with a trace of sympathy. This monk thought he had done a good deed and brought a great help to the sect, but he didn't know that he had brought something to the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha. He knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't agree so easily to this monk. It turned out that he was just looking for a scapegoat. Sensing that Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang were talking about something behind him, Fa Ming couldn't help turning around and asking, "What is it, benefactors?" Chu Xiu coughed and said, "No problem. It's just that I suddenly thought of something. Although I'm a descendant of the Primal Venerables, I've made some enemies since I stepped into the world. And because of the recent dispute between the southern and eastern regions, I've also offended some cultivators from the southern region. I'm afraid that if I join forces with the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha, I'll implicate it." Fa Ming smiled. "So that's what young Master Chu is worried about. Then don't worry. Although my Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha doesn't dare to claim to be strong, I can still bear some karma. Since young Master Chu has saved me once, this monk can help young Master Chu deal with this little grudge. As a person from a Buddhist sect, at the very least, one should be modest enough on the surface." Now, Fa Ming felt that he was being very modest. In fact, what he thought was very simple. Looking at the entire Daoyuotian continent, as long as 3 pure temples stood up, the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha would dare say that everyone here was trash. Fa Ming had also heard about the dispute between the southern and eastern regions. In the eyes of the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha, this kind of thing was nothing at all. Even in the entire eastern and southern regions, only High Heaven sect and the World Sword sect were worthy of the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha's attention. If these people really dared to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, Fa Ming believed that with the majesty of the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha, he could force them to retreat with a single word. Shang Tianliang looked at Fa Ming with even more sympathy in his eyes. He wondered if Fa Ming would still be able to smile after he found out just how much karma he had promised. Chu Xiu's group of 3 headed towards the hinterland of the central region, and did not encounter anyone from the Sanskrit sect again. The Sanskrit sect's secret technique should only be able to roughly locate a target's location, but it was impossible to transmit information in real time. Otherwise, the rules of the Exalted Divine Palace's competition would have to be completely changed. So along the way, they only managed to clean up a few monster ghosts before they found the gathering place of the Heavenly Net Treasure Buddha. You're tuning into the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.